All right, all right. Patrick Talley, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Grant.
We've known each other for a little while now. You were an advisor on my startup when I was running it last year and earlier this year, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. So I'll stop talking and just pass it
You
on to
bet.
you. We'd love to hear name. Usually the guest has a startup they're working on. So instead of an elevator pitch of that, I'd love to hear your elevator pitch of you.
Okay. Well, I always have a startup I'm working on. It not necessarily is it a startup that I'm the founder of, but in this case, I think in kind of in relation to this conversation, I live on a mountain in Colorado with my partner, and she and I have been up here for quite a bit of time. We like to tell people we look down on the people of Boulder. We're just the mountain's just up above Boulder. I'm a third generation Houstonian, and I made my home the first 50 years of my life down in Houston. Raised my kids down there. Great city, great food, great people. Got a lot of family down there and a lot of dear friends, and had a lot of business success down there as well. So love Houston. Career wise, 40-year career. 100% in innovation, mostly in software, some hardware, some IoT, but mostly software. Initially scientific software and ERP, supply chain kind of followed that. And then more recently, obviously, a bunch of SaaS software plays. Thrice retired, thrice failed, not very good at retirement. Some of it is ego, some of it is intellectual stimulation. And I like to kind of be a capitalist sometimes and see some return on investment. So I do a little bit of investing in generally in SaaS companies. I do some advising. I do a lot of advising, actually. And most of my advising, if I stay in my lane, where I think I add value, is around increasing the rate of revenue and kind of decreasing the risk around revenue for all early stage or innovation plays. And so, more succinctly, I help early stage companies, innovation companies make money faster and decrease the risk on getting that done. I've been a part of two really incredible kind of rocket ship companies that just took off from zero to stratosphere. And that was a lot of fun and some crazy times. And then I've been a part of a couple or quite a few actually mediocre plays over the course of my career, and a couple of real colossal failures as well. Hopefully learn something in all of them, but people always talk about you learn from your failures. I like to focus on learning from my successes, because learning from a failure teaches me one way that doesn't work. Learning from a success teaches me one way that does work. So I kind of want to lean into that a little more, maybe. So that's kind of how I got here. I still spend time advising, and when I'm not advising, I'm either walking around on these mountains or climbing on a canyon wall, and more recently teaching myself to fly fish.
I love it. We're still got to come visit you sometime in Boulder. But once to take it back, you're from Houston, third generation Houstonian. You went to Texas A&M, and then you went straight into more of sales roles. So I wanted to hear, how did you start your career in sales and then make that transition into innovation?
Really, not the way anybody should do it, Grant. So I stumbled and fell flat into this. So I was an education major. I loved reading and writing, and thought that I was going to be a high school football coach and teach journalism. And my last semester of school at A&M is when I did my practice, and I realized that I did not want to be a teacher. And then I put myself through. Had a little bit of debt, had been literally broke as a joke for 4.5 years, and did not want to continue to be broke. So I couldn't see starting to work on a master's straight out of school. Got a job running a gym. I was a competitive powerlifter at A&M, national championship, national champions '83, by the way.
Nice.
And so that was a pretty easy segue. One of the guys graduated at the same time as me, opened up a gym. I ran that gym. He opened up another gym, and I met a gentleman, became friends with him in the gym. And we were talking one evening, and he asked what I was doing. And I said, hey, I'm not going to be a teacher. I'm going to go get an MBA as soon as I can. And he said, go get some business experience first, And I said, who the heck is going to hire me with a teacher degree? And he said, well, if you work half as hard in business as you do on that platform lifting weights, we'd probably hire you. Why don't you come interview with us? And he had a 3-person software company. Grant, I didn't know what software was. I'd taken one programming class, and that was, you'll get a kick out of this. That was punch cards. And so that's how that was the total of my compute experience. And they threw me in to clean up a bunch of data mess. And that was really just all it required was long hours. So not a lot of genius. And then they had a bunch of seasoned sales guys that had failed at selling this stuff because it was a different type of sell, because we were selling digitized data, and nobody was doing that up until we started it. And somebody else was, but it wasn't going on across the globe. And they figured, hey, the kid is cheap. He knows the product because he helped us put it together by cleaning it up. And he's a dog, and he won't quit working. So let's turn him loose. And my deal was this: I showed up at this company. There were 3 of us, then there were 6 of us, then there were 12 of us. And these were some super smart people. And I was intimidated by all of them. And I just decided that I was not going to be as smart as they were, but I could come in before the first one and leave before the last one. Eventually I'd catch these folks. And that kind of work ethic really paid out in the long run for me.
Hugely, especially, when you're younger, when you have the time, and those few hours of coming in an hour early and leaving an hour later, just 2 hours every day, compounded over months, it really adds up.
It really does. And it's, I'm sure there were optics that, that young guy was the one that was his truck was still in the parking garage when everybody left. But I don't think that played out as much for me. And I don't think that plays out as much as people like to talk about it. I think what really plays out is, if you've got a dull knife, you got to put in the time sawing on the rope. And I was a dull blade, and it took me a while to catch up to these other people. And eventually I did. I think one of the things that happens when you are the person putting in the time is, some folks notice, and mentors have been a huge asset in my life across the board. In my powerlifting days, I was blessed that I got to lift with 2 of the best in the world at the time, world record holders. And then in the business world, I was mentored by some really sharp guys on those startup. And so that's helped me a ton. And that's one of the reasons that I try to give back. And it's one of the reasons why you and I met.
Yeah. I love it. All right. Before we move on to the next thing, I got to ask out of personal curiosity, what was your max deadlift?
704.
I got to 455 in college, and
ask me about my squat.
So what was the squat?
704. But you know what was sick is I did 633 deadlift at 181.
At 181.
Yeah, that was probably Schwartz formula. My best lift was the 633 deadlift. I was a good deadlifter. It's because we work construction, right? Yeah. And so we were always picking up heavy stuff. And I mean, that. I mean, it makes a difference.
Huge. I think I'm 6'2", at 242. My best I could do was 455 deadlift, and 525 deadlift, 455 squat. And after that, I thought, you know what? I'm not here on scholarship. I'm not training for anything. I'm too tall to do this. I'm just going to hurt myself. So I thought, let's just rep 225 and be happy.
Nothing wrong with a 500 deadlift, buddy. That's stout. By the way, I would have never thought of this. You were at U of H, right?
No. I did not go to U of H.
I'm sorry.
I went to ORU, small little school in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
I don't know why I thought you'd gone to U of H.
No. Some other people that we've had on the team went to U of H, some of the interns. So.
Okay. All right.
Nice. All right. So we heard about how you made the transition from A&M to, your career into innovation. Another kind of big jump. I always love hearing these kind of transition stories because they're never the same, and everybody has their own personal story. So when you said, it's the worst way, I was like, perfect. That's exactly how it's supposed to be. I wanted to hear how you made the switch into Golden Section Ventures as the manager.
So I'm going to back you up a minute and tell you something that's even a little more interesting. Maybe. Is that okay?
Please. Yeah.
Yeah. So So I worked for this beautiful, brilliant PhD named Harvey Price, Dr. Price, and it was his startup. And that company got bought, and the company that acquired us kept me, not because I was smart, because I was cheap and I was the only salesperson left. And they all went off and started another company. And Dr. Price told me, stay with these guys, kid. They're going to pay you. I don't have any money for you right now. We'll go start another company. We'll call you when we get traction. Well, that company got bought by a company called Landmark Graphics Software, which is one of Houston's success stories. Kind of the earliest software technology company, in Houston, is that everybody speaks to in the history of Houston tech is Compact Computer. And that company was funded by Seven Rosen. Seven Rosen also funded Landmark Graphics at the same time. And Landmark was a bunch of Texas Instruments folks who started building some really brilliant software for 3D seismic interpretation of the subsurface for oil and gas exploration. So seismologists, petrophysicists, geophysicists, and such. And Dr. Price told the guy running Landmark they needed to hire me, and probably told him this every week for probably 15 weeks. And they only hired scientists. And they kept telling Dr. Price, go away. We're not going to hire this guy. We only hire scientists. He's got an education degree. And finally, they sent this guy to get rid of me in an interview, and I passed the bar with him. And then that guy running the company said, well, let me talk to him. I'll get rid of him. And met with me. And in 15 minutes, he said, why do you want to do this? And when can you start? What I learned that was so critical to my success around sales was in the innovation space, if you know and know deeply, so if you're the person that knows something about that product and where that product fit, it's really hard to transition that into the business conversations as well. So I only had business conversations. The only quivers I had, or arrows I had in my quiver, were really around return on investment and those types of analyses on the business side. And that allowed me to go into any kind of technology, any kind of innovation, and just have business conversations, as long as I had a subject matter expert with me, right? I couldn't do any of this without a subject matter expert. And so that really was the kind of the launch of everything for me. So Dr. Price gave me the big break in introducing me into something called software. And then he gave me the big break again by introducing me to Landmark, which was where I really started having some large scale success on selling innovation, because we were at the forefront of the forefront of the forefront of that technology.
Gotcha. And how did that make the transfer into Golden Section?
Well, so then I left there and went to another early stage company out of Boston called Trilogy Software, which was more of an ERP type software. And we crushed. I mean, we blew that thing up so big. This is pre-dot-bomb. And we just, I don't even remember what the numbers were, but we had very little revenue when I got there. And 5 years later, it was just cooking. And people in Austin know the Trilogy collective. They jokingly talk about the Trilogy Mafia. A lot of the tech folks in Austin area are from Trilogy. So that ecosystem's still pretty powerful there. And it was a lot of fun. It was fast paced. And that really was kind of what moved me towards Golden Section, because what I realized was I really enjoyed the early stage of technology adoption. And it's the closer we got towards mainstream, the less joy I was having. And frankly, it was kind of the less intellectual stimulation I was getting from the job. And so for me, there's an inflection point in the technology adoption curve where the money starts really cranking in. And you can see it on the curve, right? When the curve crosses the chasm and starts moving into the later stage early adopters and mainstream, that's when the money flows. But for me, the intellectual stimulation and the real fun, the real hard part, and working with super smart people to solve super hard problems happened at the forefront of that adoption curve. And that Trilogy really taught me that. So I did it at Landmark, and we grew, and it became more of a mainstream product. I got bored and left, went to Trilogy. We blew it up. We grew. it got to where the deals were getting easier to do, and the intellectual stimulation wasn't there. Pocketbook was very happy about it, but the intellectual stimulation wasn't there. Stepped back out of that. And that's been, for me, was kind of, I just rinse and repeat that over and over and over. And that's been kind of the way for me to have a lot of joy in what I'm doing, and not just plug into a gig. There's a whole lot of intellectual challenge going on in my world for me. And that's what kind of brought me to Golden Section. So, after probably 35 years of doing this kind of stuff, you meet a lot of folks. I met some good folks down in Houston, and Dougal, who runs Golden Section, invited me to participate. And Golden Section works with early stage, almost exclusively SaaS-based technology companies in all B2B. I don't know anything about B2C. I'm a horrible consumer. I don't actually understand why people buy things in terms of consumer space. I understand very, very well how people make business decisions to buy.
Makes perfect sense. I mean, it sounds like everything from your previous stories to now that you would be the perfect fit for a B2B SaaS aimed venture fund. So.
I mean, there's people out there that I know who I think stack up pretty well, but there's not a lot of folks that I know or have encountered that have got kind of 40 years right at that innovations aspect. And so it's because I kind of consciously chose to stay in there, but I consciously chose to stay in there because I found it intellectual challenge, not because it was financially the most rewarding. Man, some of the people that I worked with through my career who stayed in with those companies when they become really large companies and got acquired, and they did financially, they did really, really well. It's just not a job that I would have enjoyed.
Yeah. And then, as I think it's very much an American viewpoint of, I want to have a job that I enjoy. It's, American like apple pie. Whereas a lot of other places, especially like Japan, it's go to college, get a job, stay there until, you retire one day, as long as you can. But you have a good point about, you want to stay in a place where you enjoy it so that you can keep learning, so that you can keep growing, so that you can keep going to better and better things like that.
Yeah, I'm going to do everything in my power not to quote Scott Galloway, but Galloway has said, I've heard him say many things that I've said before. And one of them is, the whole work-life balance thing, it's a real challenge. I don't think you're ever in balance. I think you're always working towards balance and level setting and checking yourself to see if you're in balance. And one of the things, I've said, so I've had some miserable times in the early stage companies, especially when they're not getting traction and they're failing, and you've got to lay people off, and you're not making your house note off the income because there is none, right? I mean, there's been some horrible times, and I always remind people that whole, kind of follow your bliss in the work world. You still got to clean toilets and take out the trash, right? So, I've had that conversation before. There's a lot of grinding that's got to be done, even if you're in a place that's joyful. And, I could use my rock climbing as an analogy. There are times that I'm in absolute bliss climbing. I love the sport. And there's other times when it's harder than hell. And I kind of wish I hadn't have bitten off that much that week, right? Or that day. So it's it's life, man, right? It's not all roses and champagne and cupcakes. There's some hard times. And so, I think that there's a lot of different ways to look at capitalism. And I have some friends who have, a certain amount of disdain for capitalism. And, for me, it's always been kind of the easiest way to make a difference and use some of what that gain comes from to help other people make a difference in their lives. I certainly could make statements where it irritates me. And I think a lot of the Pareto principle that is involved in capitalism is painful to a lot of people. And I'd rather democratize as much of that as we can. But plugging in and grinding, you heard me say that early on, and that goes back to it's not always, just rainbows and champagne.
Yeah. I heard somebody once say, if you're trying to get to the land of milk and honey, that means you're still going to have to deal with bee stings and bullshit.
Yeah. So. I mean, I don't know anyone that's been successful in life that hasn't gone through some hard times. I don't know anyone who's successful in business that hasn't gone through some hard times.
Definitely. So I wanted to ask you this next question. You've got a pretty good, well-rounded view of, entrepreneurship in Texas and even the U.S. as a whole.
Yeah.
And you've seen everything. You started your career in punch cards. So you've seen everything from punch cards to floppy disks to CDs, and now you can fit, 4 terabytes on a thumb drive.
You left out reel-to-reel tapes.
Yeah, I'm sure there's 20 other versions in there. VHS.
Hey, so that in data centers they were way out of reel-to-reel tapes and had moved on, but every movie in the 60s, 70s, and 80s continued to show reel-to-reel tape because in people's minds that's what a data room looked like. If those tapes weren't spinning, it wasn't a data room.
Yep.
I interrupted you. Go ahead.
It's just funny, the difference between perception of this is what I think is happening to this is what really is. Even, you look at something like AI right now and you're like, there's a thinking machine back there going on. You're like, no, like there's a large language model. And when you type, yellow donut, it connects it to the most related words. And like, there's not a robot back there just thinking this. It's just connecting. It's different.
Two quick vignettes. IBM, when was this? In the 80s, put out a new mainframe. This is before desktops and laptops. Put out a new mainframe that was about half the size of the previous year and had twice the capacity. It was a flop. The next year, or halfway into that marketing season, they put out a new mainframe that was twice as fast as the previous, and it was a success. The only difference was the newer one was much, much larger because people did not buy into the fact that a small footprint box could be more powerful. That's a true story. Old IBM folks could tell you what the model number is. I cannot. And you mentioned thinking machine. In the 90s, I can remember at the Society of Geophysicists convention in Houston, Texas, I can remember a computer called the Thinking Machine. And Grant, it had a huge array of lights that would blink and run back and forth and race, just like in the old movies. And what were those lights for? So that you thought it was actually doing something, because that box was doing nothing with those lights.
It reminds me of the old, like control panels and like Star Trek. Like none of these are doing anything. They're just blinking lights.
100% that, exactly.
But I wanted to ask, you have a long history of an innovation and technology all across Texas and all across, the U.S. as a whole. But specifically in Texas, Austin, Houston, where have you seen things come the last few years, and where do you see things going in the next? We're right now just to give you some time to think about this question. We've got a huge influx of startups and entrepreneurs and even large Fortune 500 companies moving from California to Texas. I think we're the #1 state right now who's accepting the most Californians. Just things are changing so dramatically with different laws between us. They're taxing the people like crazy. We're getting rid of taxes here in certain ways. There's pros, cons to each way. Florida's blown up, Miami. Now AI is, the hot topic of this year. I just want to ask, where do you see the next kind of 10 years going with Texas?
Well, so so we're in a bubble with AI. I don't care what anyone that wants to argue, they'll explain to me how this is different. And the one thing I've said for the past 7 bubbles, starting my first bubble was the .bomb bubble, and I was explaining to the old people how this one was different. And then I watched my entire portfolio go to zero in the stock market. And since then I've said for the last 7 bubbles, you're in a bubble when somebody tells this one's different, and everyone's saying the AI is different. and there are nuances, and AI is different in many ways, and AI is going to change a lot of things, not nearly as fast as people think. I'm bullish as hell. I think it's going to be fantastic. I think for the healthcare sector alone around diagnoses, it's going to be just super special, and we're going to help a lot of humans. I think there's going to be further democratization of technology through AI, which is very exciting for me, especially for people outside of the U.S. or just people in general. who don't have access to capital. And that, as an optimist, that's kind of the thing that I'm most hopeful about. So what did I say? So I think that we've got an AI bubble, and we're going to see that there'll be a level set and a reckoning in that, and there'll be a lot of great companies that come out of that bubble and do some really good things with AI. I think that one of our biggest problems in the U.S. historically is if you're not, if you didn't go to Stanford or Wharton, and if you did, if you don't have an office in the 94, 107, or 105 zip codes in San Francisco, your access to capital is greatly reduced. If you're a female, if you're a person of color, it's greatly reduced. I think we're starting to see some of that. And I know that somebody could argue that it's still the good old boys club, and I'm sure it is, but I'm hoping that we're making a difference. I see way too many people putting way too much effort in making that change. And so I'm pretty excited about that. And I think that makes a difference. I think that travels outside of Texas, and I'll come back to Texas in a moment, but I think that can travel outside of Texas. I think that we're going to see more startups from more countries getting funded, and more people that historically haven't had access to capital. That's what I want to believe. I'll maybe in my 90s, I'll be rattling my cane at people still arguing that it ought to be that way. But I want to believe that, and I want to be a part of helping that wherever I can. And I see a lot of smart people that are actually putting effort into that. So I think some of the things that I've seen you do are steps towards that as well. So I think there's an awakened sense of that. As far as Texas, I think that I think there was a lot of talk for a long time. And so let me back up, because I was really going to talk about Texas, and then I realized I was actually headed towards just speaking about Houston. So it's each one of the ecosystems are similar and different. There's a lot of, because the Austin group seemed like geographically it was so much closer for so long. There was a whole lot of socialization that went on with that. And there was a whole lot of, we're the cool kids because we're all doing startups and we're all involved in this, but they were also spending a ton of their social time together. So I think there was everyone kind of eating their own dog food around just how great all that was. And then I think that kind of plays out and fans out. And then it actually was some, we've seen some really smart things come out of Austin, and that ecosystem has done pretty well. I think Dallas and Houston, the big challenges that both of those cities have is they're so vast geographically. And, I can remember, God, when the guys opened the Cannon, they were like, hey, come on out. And I was like, I'm not driving an hour and a half to have a beer with people I don't know to talk about technology. I talk about technology all day today. So I think some of that has moved on, and people are realizing that you don't have to be physically next to someone. You can get a heck of a lot done with Zoom or Google Meets or whatever, and Slack. And I think that people are realizing, and it seems like, and sometimes it's the red car syndrome or scenario, right? If I'm thinking about looking for red cars, I'm only going to see red cars all day long. But I feel like I'm seeing kind of pockets of kind of that are then kind of vertically integrated pockets, and they're coalescing around kind of verticals. And I'm hoping that kind of works, because I think that is historically how it's actually happened. And then, and as opposed to bringing the whole city together, it's on the Northwest side, you've got people talking about energy. On the Southeast side, down towards NASA, you've got people talking about aero and space, and medical center, right? I think that's what we're seeing. And again, it might be me looking for it more than anything else, but historically, that's kind of organically how it's happened, right? And that's going back to frankly, the Hewlett Packard days in their garage back in Sand Hill 100 years ago.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. Just kind of being down here and working down here, you can definitely see the focus of technology is staying kind of between Rice University, U of H, and downtown, and that kind of triangle right there seems to be pretty clustered. There's obviously going to be people who work from home and they're in the Heights, they're out in Katy, they're all over the place. But the vast majority is going to be down there. I think the Ion has definitely tried hard to build that, but then now they're taking kind of a left turn into a different kind of aim. But now we've got like the Esperson building where they're trying to build a startup community there. Impact Hub here in downtown has done a pretty good job. So there's things happening, and there's people who are trying to do like, happy hours and things. But you're definitely right. We do have things like the Canon wants to meet, and like you want to meet at 5 o'clock over on the west side. Like I'm not going to sit on I-10 for an hour and a half just to get out there.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mentioned the Canon guys. I'm not picking on them at all. It's to prove the point. It's a really big city, and it's really hard to get across, and then get back to your family or your friends or whatever it is that you're truly interested in. I think one of the things that does come from all these different attempts is, each one, so when they had Surge down there, just outside of downtown, and I guess what later became Midtown, I went down there and talked a couple of times to the startups at Surge, and I came out of those talks with 2 or 3 new relationships and one friendship. So, cast your seeds out there, and you're gonna get some germination and some planning of relationships and all. And that's really what this stuff boils down to, is finding like-minded people that kind of have the same kind of drive and ethics and morals you have, and then deciding if you want to do something together now or later or maybe never, and just support each other.
Definitely. Just zooming out a second before I forget this, I want to say one major advantage, if whoever's watching this, if you're not familiar with Texas, what we have is the Texas Triangle, and it kind of is like San Antonio, Houston, and then Dallas up here, and then right kind of almost in the middle is Austin, which is our capital. So you've got these, Austin is kind of the startup hub for Texas right now, but it's also being called the first stop for Californians. They come over here, they stop in Austin, they say, hey, everything's way too expensive, and then they move to San Antonio, Houston, or Dallas, and you can get between them at most, I think the longest drive is from Houston to Dallas, which is about 4 hours. But everything's within that range, whereas in California, the different hubs and major cities are all almost in a line that you have to go down the coast.
Yep.
So we're at that major pro there. I'm not going to put too much weight behind that Amtrak rail. They've been talking for the last 10 years about starting that, so we'll see. But driving, you can catch a bus, you can do different ways. It's not that bad. If you're in Texas, you basically need a car to get around. You can't, like if you live in New York, you can ride the subway. Yeah. But I wouldn't say that. I definitely agree with you on the AI bubble part.
Yeah.
I saw a picture of somebody's who's the CEO of NVIDIA right now? I forget his name. Well, either way, but it was just a picture of him, leather jacket, hair slicked back, signing some girl's tits, and you're just like, yeah, we're in a bubble right now. Whenever startup founders are doing things like this, yeah, it's something's way off. And
Jensen Huang, and yes, it's and the guy running X. So that's they're the new deities, they're the new rock stars, and all that's. I mean, again, this stuff level sets, man. I mean, Mark Andreessen was the guy, or one of the guys in the pre.bomb world. So I mean, if everyone that thinks that this AI thing is not a bubble, well, I guess you can't convince people of things, but they should do some research on the .bomb. They really should, because it's a harsh reckoning, and it will happen. And I was talking to a buddy who bought some NVIDIA, a younger friend of mine, one of my climbing partners. He bought some NVIDIA, and he was asking me about it, and I was like, well, I said, I think we're in a bubble, and I think there's going to be a reckoning even on that stock. And he I could feel him. We were riding in the car. I could feel him kind of laughing at the old guy in the room. I was like, dude, I've been here. Trust me, but don't do what I did. When in the .bomb, when Amazon stock went through the floor, I sold it. It was probably $17 a share at the time. I don't know. Right. So it's good. It just takes longer, and people always, Gates has a great, whether you like him or not, he has a great quote about technology always takes longer than we think it's going to take, and it always has a greater impact than we think it's going to have. And I believe that. So AI is here to stay. There's going to be a reckoning. There's going to be a lot of fallout, and a lot of big players are going to end up winning.
A lot of people are definitely going to win, but I think there's also there's a term for it, but it's just everyone thinks they're smarter than they are, and they think they can time the market, and they're going to wait and think like, well, I'll catch it before the stock collapses. And same thing that happened in the bubble, it's called .com bubble, and same thing that happened in 2008. And same thing, history doesn't exactly repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme.
Well, bubbles definitely repeat, and they're amazing.
But to that, not to sound too negative, I do believe AI is not going anywhere. It's a Pandora's box. We've opened it. It's going to stay here. I think you're completely right about I just read an article the other day. A guy used ChatGPT to self-diagnose, and he found out, or he asked the right questions. It made him believe he had some sort of, I think, prostate cancer. He went in, got that specifically checked, and found out he had it, got it taken care of before it turned into something. So, cool. It's already saving lives.
Yeah. I mean, it's, and again, the .bomb was a colossal bust, but what drove the .bomb was the internet, the advent of the internet, right? And we certainly would say that the internet has served us well for the most part since then. So again, same thing with AI, right? There'll be a level set, and coming on the other side of that, it's going to be huge value. It's great technology, and it's taken long enough, man. So I can remember late 80s, early 90s Forbes articles on AI. I mean, the cover articles in Forbes and Fortune magazine talking about how AI was going to do all these great things for us. And we, after a while, we just kind of yawned and said, yeah, sure. But
yeah,
so we're getting there.
We're getting there, one thing at a time. All right. Kind of last big question I wanted to ask. Tell me more about your book that you're writing right now. What's the premise? Why are you writing it? Why now?
Well, I don't know if I can answer the why now. I've got the bandwidth, I guess, is the why now. I think so. I've written, I don't know, 10 or 11 books, and 2 of them have actually been good. This is my first business book, and I guess really what I'm trying to do is demystify the B2B sales, right? Selling the book is all about selling innovation to innovators. And I know a lot about a handful of things, and I know very little about most things, but I know a lot about selling B2B innovation to innovators. And I think I can help some people with that information. That the other book that I've written, of the 10 or 11 that I've written that I think is good, it was absolutely about, if I sat down with a few hundred hours, I can actually help some people. That book helped some people. The other book that I put together that's good is a children's book, and a lot of people laugh with that book, and that therefore it's a good book. And I think this will be a good book as well, because I will help people. And so the idea is that people go to classes, and they go to all these seminars, and they go to people learn it in college now. It wasn't a class. When I was younger, there was nothing about selling or industrial sales or anything like that when I was in college. And they learn from their management, and none of that is the truth of what really happens, right? And so I think kind of demystifying this stuff, so many people that have never sold think that sales is, oh, that guy could sell ice to an Inuit, and oh, that guy, he's got the gift of gab. They play golf, and they go to restaurants, or they go to happy hour. Well, I don't play golf. I've never played golf. It bores me to tears. I would pay my clients golfing outings and say, y'all go play golf without me. You don't want to spend 4 hours with me. A little of me goes a long way. Nobody wants to spend 4 hours with me, playing golf, especially. So, So the idea again is, let's take the black box out of this. It's not about personalities. It's about a process, and it's about rigor around a process. And let's demystify this thing so that everybody understands it. And for me, what's so important at the innovation inflection of an adoption curve is, and the kind of, you and I have talked about this before, I take the innovator sector of the adoption curve and I break it out again. And on the far left, I call those the super innovators, right? The very first few customers, a very different behavior in those customers, a very different way that you need to show up and sell for them, and take care of them. And so really, what I'm trying to do is get people that are customers that are buying, get management, get product development people, right? So everybody on the product side wondering why the hell the salespeople are doing this, right? Get the people on the buy side to understand these salespeople are not trying to scalp you. These people are trying to help you make an informed decision, and they don't really care what decision you make. They just care if you take up all their lives and all their bandwidth to make a decision. So let's put a process in place. Let's go make a bloody informed decision, and let's see what happens from that. And so that's really what it's about, is kind of taking a different look at sales than the way most people outside of sales tend to think of it, the way a lot of people inside of sales, I think of it as well. And so really it's being in service to the customer, helping them make a decision, make an informed decision. And then if that's the case, then kind of what really is going on in a lot of the sales meetings when the management's beating up the 10 salespeople because they're not making their numbers, and the salespeople are saying the leads are weak. It's generally people aren't adhering to a process because process takes rigor. That's it.
Yeah.
So that's the book.
I think that's incredibly important. And sales, more than anything, is one of those meta skills that no matter what industry you're in, if you can sell, you're going to have a job. You're not, the salespeople are usually not the first to get let go.
Yeah, so it served me well, and it served a lot of people I know quite well. And when people are sincere at doing it and not just trying to get to close another deal, I think it can be a really noble and wonderful profession. Again, all you're doing is you're helping people make informed decisions. And so after that, there's a ton of soft skills that are learned in it. But the soft skills, I contend you can be quite successful in sales without having the soft skills if you take every one of these sales opportunities as a project. And I think it's interesting when I walk people through some of these things that when they don't have experience in sales, the light kind of comes on like, oh, hell, this is just like putting a product out. You've got a goal, happily deployed customer. Prior to that, you have to sign a contract, right? Prior to that, these are the legal has to look at it. Prior to that, IT has to vet it, right? Prior to that, we have to have some kind of an ROI story to tell executive management because we're going to ask them to write a check. It's just process, right? And it's the same kind of thing. So that's it. And on the book, I'm doing it a little bit differently. In the past, I've always published. You go to Amazon, you buy the book for $30. I get $5, etc. We're going to put this thing out as a $10 or less. I don't know the price, $7, $9, $10 or less PDF that people can download. Just swipe on the website itself. And then I'll go back. We'll keep it evergreen. I'll take reader feedback. And if there's a chapter that people want me to go a little deeper on or add some more to or clarify, then I'll periodically clean it up a little bit. And I think we'll be able to offer up something that people can come back to over time and kind of continue to sharpen that knife that I was talking about in the beginning of this conversation, right? To where you become the samurai at this thing.
A book that's always getting better. I love it.
It's the idea.
Awesome. I'll put the link to that in the description of this video. So perfect. Well, that's all the questions that I have for you today. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Patrick, and catching up.
Good to see you.
Always love seeing your cabin in the background. It looks so cozy. Especially, we're about to have a whole week worth of rain here in Houston right now. So, yeah, wish us luck. But,
I love my Houston people. I hope everybody gets through it.
Yeah, we'll be all right. It's just another hurricane season in Houston. So, All right, man. I'll talk to you later.
It's good to see you. Bye.